Lovie Smith today was introduced as the head coach of the Texans. That is official, and I think after yesterday and leading up to yesterday, and I think a lot of them, like, what the hell is Houston doing? I think there were some more answers. But what was interesting to me, guys, and we will get back to Baylor, and not just Baylor, but the men's basketball standings and also what's going on tonight with a couple of games. Brian Flores' attorneys released a statement. Jack, do you have that by any chance? You may not. You should, but that's okay. Brian Flores released a statement, his attorneys. I want you guys to tell me what you think of this. Mr. Flores is happy to hear the Texans have hired a black head coach. Lovie Smith is Mr. Flores' goal in bringing his case is to provide real opportunities for black and minority candidates to be considered for coaching executive positions within the NFL. However, we would be remiss not to mention that Mr. Flores was one of 3 finalists for the Texans head coaching position, and after a great interview, mutual interest, it's obvious the only reason Mr. Flores was not selected was his decision to stand up against racial inequality across the NFL.
Well, every time he interviews for a job and doesn't get it, that question has to be asked.
Wait a minute. I thought he was doing this because his goal was to help black coaches get opportunities in the NFL, and it wasn't about him.
Well, see, that can't be mutually exclusive, because if about getting black coaches opportunities, that's what he is, right? He's a black coach. He wants to get opportunity for himself. But again, that's something that, again, and this is also a civil suit, so they're going to throw everything they can at it, and they're going to. Look, I get what your point is, and I kind of maybe agree with you a little bit. But on the other side of it, to play devil's advocate, it is weird that, you're interviewing for all these jobs and you have what you think are great interviews, and the minute you decide to sue the NFL, you don't get that job. That question has to be asked.
Maybe bites your lip until all the jobs are filled? Or, here's another thing. Did he just take away some of the luster of Lovie Smith getting the job?
I mean, basically he's saying I would have been better for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I could never imagine Lovie Smith doing that, or maybe others. But Lovie Smith has mentioned he's with the cause too. He has mentioned this even many years ago about the face of the NFL as far as the head coaching or general manager in executive opportunities.
Didn't Brian Flores acknowledge last week whenever he filed his suit that he realized, or his lawyer said they realized, that could cost him some opportunities?
Yes.
So yes. No surprise then, basically?
So in other words,
I know he has to point it out to say, like, see, told you, like, I get it, but yeah, I think it's kind of shady that he's taken away from another black man being hired. Like, if that's the example that he used to try to further his point, I think that's disrespectful to Lovie Smith. But I do think he also has a point in terms of the NFL and their hiring practices. But, I mean, you just said a week ago, or your lawyer did, one or the other, that you expected this would probably hurt your chances. So I have to say, not surprised that they didn't go with Brian Flores. He also was just fired. Did we forget that? No. Like, did we forget that he was fired? Now, I know his arguing that it wasn't for cause or whatever, but there does seem to be a whole lot out of Miami that he was not the friendliest, best person to work with. I think that's become public, and
that's kind of like, that's not even that's like it. No one even discusses.
No, he's being talked about for being fired because he's black, but there are people saying there are other reasons outside of that. Now, does he also have a point on the NFL's hiring practices? Yes, because more than one thing can be true at a time. But like him potentially not getting the Texans job because of his lawsuit, I just have to say, not whether that's right or wrong, I'm not surprised. Like, you knew this when you did it, and so you didn't get it, and it's not a surprise. But I understand you have to point it out and see. There's the example. But yeah, I don't like if there was really truly any shade thrown at Lovie. I don't like that. He doesn't have to go about it that way.
Yeah, it's almost like but. And the point is, you can't have 2 black head coaches in Houston. You can only have 1. And Houston decided to pick Lovie Smith. Now, I'll say this, and John McClain will join us at 5:30, and nobody will have more of this than anyone in the world than John McClain. He owns the coverage when it comes to the Texans. Others are good at it too, but he is elite. Did they hire Lovie Smith and change their mind because of the Brian Flores lawsuit?
No.
Not to get Brian Flores out of the mix, but they had to hire a black head coach, they felt. And if they had brought in Josh McCown with 0 experience, white guy, who we know, or someone else, that would have been a bad look.
I don't think that the Texans are all that concerned with their optics right now. Based on, and not just when it comes to racial equality, I think that they're not. That's not what they've been good at the last few years. Look, Bill O'Brien, you know why Bill O'Brien got fired? The same reason Brian Flores got fired in Miami. He was a jackwagon.
Yeah.
No, nobody could take him anymore. I mean, like, they're like, I can't take this.
What movie do I hear that jackwagon? What, is that a movie or a commercial?
I don't know, but I mean, that's what he was. I mean, so, I mean, they weren't, he was wrecking the team long before they had any of these other problems. And then, of course, it's all kind of intersected together. But, yeah, optics are not their big concern right now. And I don't think, as critical as I've been of Cal McNair and Jack Easterby and all that, Nick Caserio comes from New England. He's trying to, put their way into this. I think Lovie Smith is not for optics. I think Lovie Smith is what they thought was best for them right now. Now, is that what's best for the fans of the team or whatever? No, but there are things going on with the Texans I don't think any of us will ever understand. And until they get those things, they probably need the safe hire, and that's what Lovie Smith is.
Yeah, I don't know when the Texans were voted the beacon for hiring practices and why they should have to hire black coaches to make a statement. There were how many jobs open?
9.
9 jobs, and there were a couple that went with minority candidates, and that's the problem, right? Like that's what the whole in the big picture, that's what Brian Flores is arguing, is that there's not enough opportunities or enough hires being made, but the Houston Texans had absolutely zero obligation to hire anybody of any color. It's their head coaching decision, and I know that is part of the NFL's argument, and that's part of the problem. But I don't know how I'm just saying I don't know how you pinpoint the Texans and go, well, they only did this because of this. No, I think they just hired a head coach that they wanted, and maybe it would have been you if not for the lawsuit. But then to say they only hired a black coach because of my lawsuit, isn't that what you're basically saying? I think that's bull. That's bull. Just because they were like, well, we better hire a black guy because Brian Flores' lawsuit against the NFL. Why would the Houston Texans think that way? They clearly don't care what anybody thinks with their practices. So why would Brian Flores scare an individual organization into making a hire purely based on color?
Why was Lovie Smith not a part of their 3 finalists and then got the job?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean,
look, again, optics are not their thing right now. And Brian Flores should be a head coach in the NFL, in my opinion. He may have to grow up and change some things, but he's certainly proven talented enough. But how many
head coaches have had to get better personally or X's and O's or how they run
the guy he worked for?
Belichick
the guy he worked for. So,
exactly.
Yeah, and look, and Brian Flores may have gotten fired because he was caustic and all that, but Stephen Ross also isn't a great owner. The Dolphins are a mess. There are, I want to say, of the 32 owners, 11 of them are really good at what they do, and the rest of them fall into different categories.
Yeah, there's some that are a mess. We know who they are. Lem 30, tread lightly on this topic. This is a legal posturing for his civil suit. It has nothing to do with Lovie Smith, and he never said anything bad about him. From Lem 30, Brian Flores is not going to get a job this coaching cycle because of his lawsuit. He's more qualified for a head coaching job than all three, as you know it. Lem 30, he just got fired. He was fired because he's an asshole. He's fired because he was hard to work for. Now, Nick Saban's been known to be that way. Bill Belichick's been known to be that way as well, but they win. I didn't think Brian Flores should have been fired. I thought Miami should have stuck with him because I thought at times they showed a pretty nice, in fact, we questioned why was he fired? And then some of what was said. This is not about us not thinking Brian Flores is a good candidate. He's a really good candidate for a lot of different teams, but when he filed the lawsuit, he knew he could have been putting a bullet in his head for at least this coaching cycle.
Well, and look, this is...
And that's either brave or he should have waited, and that wasn't the smartest thing to do. I commend him for fighting for whatever the hell he wants to fight for.
And look, this lawsuit is about bigger things. Look, Byron Leftwich and Eric Bieniemy should be head coaches in this league right now. Absolutely, in my opinion. But again, there's only 32 jobs. And that's just 2 guys I threw out there. I think Leslie Frazier deserves another shot as well. That's 3 just off the top of my head. But this one is about the Giants in particular potentially stepping in it, whether they did or didn't. And hiring it, essentially deciding on someone and then having Brian Flores come in as a token interview, which would have been terrible. Now, of those owners who know what they're doing, for a long time, I would have told you the Maras are one of them. But maybe right now they don't. And That's what this is about. So that's the other thing that he needs to focus. It's all posturing for the civil suit. But the thing they need to focus on, the only way that they're going to win this thing is if they prove that the Giants had no intention of hiring Brian Flores. That's the only way they're going to win.
Before they started the interview with Brian Flores.
Yeah, they had no intention. He was just there to check a box.
And I think that there is no question in my mind that numerous NFL teams have done that. And that is absolutely everything against what the Rooney Rule is supposed. It's not just that you have to hire or have to interview minority candidates to just make them feel better, to gain experience in the interview process. It's also to look at who's available. And now, there are some black coaches who have not been successful. Lovie Smith is no longer the head coach of Tampa Bay because he wasn't good there. He was great there as a coordinator under Tony Dungy. He was fired in Chicago after a phenomenal run there, including 10-6 his last year there, and they have not been the same. Why was he fired? Maybe they felt like he couldn't take him any further. I don't know.
Well, Lovie wasn't terrible in Tampa, though. I mean, they weren't what they are now, but that's Tom Brady.
He was like 2-14 and 6-10 or something like that.
But I mean, but Jameis Winston's first 2 years too. I mean, he had a young quarterback, and that's what they were doing. They were trying to rebuild. What happened with Lovie Smith in Tampa was Dirk Cutter stabbed him in the back and made him out his way out the door, and wasn't any good either. And that's why Bruce Arians is there now. So he's 2 coaches removed from Tampa Bay. And look, maybe Lovie's not today's head coach, for Houston fans, and it's not as inspiring. But the dude has been to Super Bowls, as an assistant and as a head coach. He's got a ring as an assistant coach, I believe. And so he's got the.
I do know this. After yesterday's shock and awe of how this thing flipped so quickly, that then after kind of settling in and really looking at what Lovie Smith can provide, there will still be some that are pulling their hair out and understanding, like, what the hell happened? And we'll have, again, John at 5:30. But I do think that after the dust settled, I think more people kind of said, okay, wait a minute, this is what Lovie Smith's going to do. There are things he hasn't done well. And there are some things, for example, they went from having 9 turnovers forced 2 years ago to 21 or so this year. That's a big difference, and that's what Lovie Smith does. That's what his defenses do, like Dan Quinn, in what he did, and even a better situation with the Cowboys with a better overall team around him.
Yeah, I don't like the hire for the Texans. I mean, I said this yesterday. I was not thrilled with it, and I can't imagine a lot of Texans fans were too fired up. I'm sure they probably would have been more fired up over Brian Flores, but to the tread lightly comment, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. So, I mean, whatever with that. And, in terms of not taking a shot at Lovie Smith, he said that Lovie Smith was only hired over his client because did he not say that? Was that not what it was said? So that is an indirect shot at Lovie Smith. I mean, that's saying Lovie Smith only got the job because he's black and he's not Brian Flores. So, I mean, I take that as a shot. If I got that job and another guy said, well, he only got that job because he's my skin color and he's not me because I'm filing a lawsuit, I would take that somewhat personally. I'm sure I would be understanding of the position the guy's coming from, but that is a little bit of a shot at Lovie Smith.
Yeah, it is.
So we can split hairs on that and agree to disagree whether it was. I'm not hung up on that part of it. But just from Lovie's vantage point, I'm sure he's probably like, well, dang, dude, like, they don't have to be like that.
Also, and Lovie won't even.
And it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. But as far as treading lightly and him not taking a shot at Lovie, I'm gonna dispute that because I don't know what we need to tread lightly about. We're talking about the situation, and it's a tense topic. That's why there's a lawsuit from Brian Flores. That's why there's been years of this conversation. And look, everybody has their hands up when it comes to why does Eric Bieniemy not have a job? Why did Brian Flores not get longer in Miami? Well, the Miami question was kind of answered based on what NFL reporters have said about his personality behind the scenes. Now, can we say that for sure? No, we don't work for the Miami Dolphins. So you take that for what it's worth. You can believe that or not believe that, whatever the case may be. But yeah, going back to the very basic part of this, I'm sure that lawsuit's going to cost them jobs. They knew coming in it's going to cost them jobs, and maybe the Texans was one of those. So we'll see. Who's going to be the team to step up? Or is it going to become a Kaepernick and everybody's like, nope, too toxic and too radiation, I'm not going to even touch that. Now that would turn into a bigger problem for the NFL, as we saw it did with Kaepernick to an extent.
And look, you can still have a great interview and still not be the top client for a job. I mean,
man, we don't know why they chose who they chose.
So we don't
really know
it's a
why.
Lawsuit, so I don't know.
And we don't know, even to this day, and I hope to God we find out someday, why Eric Bieniemy's not a head football coach. And we've been told it might be things that he's had off the field. It could be that he's not a good head coach. He doesn't call the plays in Kansas City, although he gets a lot of credit for that because it's Andy Reid.
If there's a lot of people that said that stuff that also said like that Lamar Jackson shouldn't be a quarterback.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
No,
So
I agree. I agree. And who knows? Maybe Eric Bieniemy knows that Andy Reid's not going to be doing this for another year or two, and that he's the next man. Now, if Andy Reid was to leave and the success continued, even though this year success for them ended in the championship game, if Andy Reid was to retire and Eric Bieniemy was not promoted from within,
then you got to wonder, like, what do the Chiefs know about him?
because they want to win.
Yeah.
Now, some want to win, and Jerry's not perfect in this deal. Jerry's a great dude when it comes to a lot of the things what he's done for the minority movement, and in fact, one of the first organizations to ever bring minority coaches into training camp as volunteers and to kind of as interns was him. But he's not like he's got the greatest hiring practice.
No, he does. And the thing is, and this is not just Jerry that does this. I think there are other owners that, and organizations that don't. But because Jerry's the owner and the GM, this is where it gets muddier because he has both those jobs. So if Jerry and Steven and the brain trust there have decided that Mike McCarthy's the guy, that's the guy they're going to hire. And every other interview they have to do is because they're checking a box. And that's not the spirit of the Rooney Rule. And that doesn't make Jerry Jones a racist. It just makes him myopic, and that is where he's going. He's going, like, when he hired Bill Parcells, how many people do you think he interviewed other than Bill Parcells? Now, he probably talked to a bunch of people, and a bunch of people told him, like, look, you need a Bill Parcells guy in here to kind of rework what you're doing. And he did that. But he didn't, and that was before the Rooney Rule. But he's not sitting around most of these coaching searches. Jerry's not interviewing 8, 9, 10 people like the Jaguars did. He's interviewing 3 to 4 maximum. And one of them, he decided in November before he fired the coach in January that's the one he probably wanted the most.
All right, we got to take a break.